All right, class is in session. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the channel. Today we are talking about Sweet Pea. One of my favorite things about having this little channel start to grow is the fact that I can recommend shows to people and they will check it out. But also, it's the fact that if I watch a show and no one else in my life has watched it, I can come on here, do a video about it, and then have a discussion about it with people in the comments. It's so good. And today I want to do that with the show Sweet Pea. This is a new show that just dropped last week. It is going to blow up on TikTok. I am telling you right now. It is 6 episodes, and it is about a woman who has killer impulses.
People I'd love to kill. Man-spreaders.
All right, she wants to be a serial killer. She walks around and she doesn't like people and they piss her off, and she fantasizes all day about acting on these impulses.
Donna in the mini market. Who is never happy to help.
And the remainder of the series is exploring the idea of what happens if one of these people actually engaged in these impulses. Now, I'm going to give a spoiler-free thoughts on this, basically a recommendation, why I think you should check it out. But the bulk of this video is going to be a spoiler talk, so I will let you know when I'm going to get into full spoilers. But if you're not sold, let's talk about it. So first off, it's 6 episodes. It is so refreshing to have a show where pretty much every single scene is moving the plot forward. Every single scene is impactful. It is purely focused on this woman's descent into darkness. It is also incredibly interested in exploring the ideas of bullying and self-victimization. This idea that just because you were traumatized in the past doesn't mean you should let it define you, doesn't mean you make that your identity and your character, but also simultaneously it shows a lot of pity for people that are stuck in place, that are still mentally stuck in high school due to how they are treated. This show looks at these issues at both ends of the stick. You know, it interrogates the idea of what makes a bully, what makes a victim, and basically how, at the end of the day, they are kind of one in the same. It's incredibly interesting. It is explored through her victims. It is also explored through people from her childhood. It's just so well done. Also, the cast here is just great. It is a cast of characters that are so incredibly well realized from the jump. You know who all these people are straight away. It's really well done. The only minor knock I am going to have against the show, really, aside from things in the spoiler section, is that I think the performance of the character Julia is unfortunately kind of bad for a lot of the show up until towards the end where certain things about her character are revealed. For the first couple episodes, it is just paper-thin writing combined with a performance that feels very clunky compared to our lead. But let's talk about our lead. There is so much good stuff going on with Ella Purnell's performance here. It is simultaneously scary, horrific, but also incredibly empathetic. She is able to draw so much empathy in situations where you're like, I should be watching this thinking you're a crazy bitch. Like, what are you doing? She's constantly running around acting on her impulses in just the most insane way possible. She does things that are so self-sabotaging at so many points, but you can't help but weirdly root for her. And I think this is a balance that the show achieves really quite well. It is really hard, given what she does later in the season, on paper, to defend her. All right, it is really hard, but when you watch the show, there's just so much understanding for her character, what she's been through, why she is the way she is. And it's interesting how well the show is able to pull off this balance, given the fact that they only have 6 episodes to do it. On top of that, I really appreciate that a lot of the characters here aren't just cut and dry. A lot of the characters operate in this really interesting gray area. There are a lot of men introduced in this show that initially feel like they're going to be paper thin, sort of like men are the worst characters. But over time, as the season progresses, they are layered. They add really interesting sort of elements that make her drive to act on her murderous impulses really complicated and interesting. There are people that look like her perfect victim, almost a justifiable murder in the show's moral compass, and then it will kind of pull the rug from under you and have you examine why you assumed the worst in these characters. It's really well done. This show is really well paced. There is a cat and mouse game as well that starts as the show progresses between cops that are looking into the murders and Ella Purnell's character. It's really well done. You are kind of informed on both characters' perspectives and you're simultaneously rooting for both of them, but worried for both of them. It's really well done. And I think it's just been a while since I've seen a show with such a well-realized main character. You have insight into what makes her family tick, what makes her friends tick, what makes her workplace tick. It really feels like you know this character at her core. So when things start going crazy, you are kind of, understanding and rooting for her, in my opinion, in a really effective way. Also, the soundtrack on this show is excellent. Billie Eilish everywhere. The intro song is awesome. The opening title cards are sick. The show looks great. The gore and the kills are genuinely quite confronting and frightening. It's so refreshing to see a show that is about killing that actually feels properly horrific and like, oh my God, wow. Really well done, really tightly constructed. I really like this show, but in order to talk about it anymore, I need to get into spoilers. So first off, I think the way this show portrayed Sweet Pea's bullying that she went through when she was younger was excellently well done. These scenes are really hard to watch. You feel bad from her from the jump. Also, I really kind of like the way that a lot of these murders are presented. Her first murder feels like almost coincidental, but there's this interesting turn it takes where she starts taking joy in it. Her first murder is when you first see her come out of her shell. And from there, the rest of the show, you just watch her get more and more confident and more kind of cunning and calculated. Peaking in this moment, right, where she confronts the cop that is investigating the murders, and she comes off with a lot of like big dick energy, right? Like there's no other way to go around it. She stands off against a cop and says, well, you broke and entered my house looking for information, so whatever you found on my laptop, you can't really use against me. Super well done. This character arc she goes through of finding self-empowerment and self-fulfillment and confidence through murdering a bunch of guys is excellently well done. It's a really fascinating journey, and I really, really like it. I also like the exploration that comes out with this first murder. There's this really interesting thing that the show does where she'll kind of murder people on impulse, right? She has wanted to murder people since the start of the show. Like the show starts and she's talking about fantasizing about killing people. And then there are people that present themselves to her in an antagonistic way, and she takes out that lust for murder on them, right? When she kills her first couple of men, it is in a roundabout way revenge for how she was treated growing up, right? She should be murdering the bully that she has tied up at home, but instead she's taking out this frustration on other guys because it's a bit easier to do, right? Whereas because Julia, the bully, represents a part of Sweet Pea's character at this point. It's so excellently well done, right? So yeah, at a certain point, she ties up her high school bully at home and she can't kill her. And the show never explicitly communicates why this is, but it's very clear that what's going on is, yeah, this bully is part of who Sweet Pea is. This bully helped make Sweet Pea who she is today. And killing her isn't good enough. She needs this bully to understand what she puts Sweet Pea through. She needs this bully to understand the weight and the impact. She also needs to understand this bully at her core. It's this really interesting idea of almost this infatuation and fascination, this obsession. It reminds me of toxic relationships, right? Oftentimes you hear people struggle to leave toxic relationships because it's like, oh, everything you've put me through, this emotional hold you've had on me, I need it to be worth something. There needs to be something more here. It needs to turn around. And it feels like what's going on here is Sweet Pea in a weird way is angry at the world for how she was treated growing up, but she finds it easier to kill random men that are a bit shitty to her rather than someone who is at the core of the problem of who she is now. She can't kill this bully because it's like, what am I without you? It's incredibly well done, incredibly interesting. And again, I just wish the performance from the actress that played Julia was a bit better. Just maybe it was the dialogue. Maybe some of her dialogue wasn't great, but my God, when she was bullying, it was rough. It was a rough performance from Julia in the present day. But circling around and kind of dovetailing, I really like what they did with the character of AJ. Initially, he comes off as a bit of a nepo baby, a bit of a schmuck, a bit of a dickhead. And as Sweet Pea gets to know him, as she almost engages in him being her first murder, you start to realize there's a sensitive side to him. He is quite switched on and actually notices Sweet Pea for who she is. And this is a nice subversion. It's really quite fascinating to watch her kind of struggle and realize that, oh, this guy isn't bad. And there are a few guys like that. Also, this other guy that she starts sleeping with, this kind of guy that works at the construction company, I think, that her dad owned, is an interesting character. He isn't as good as AJ. He isn't as emotionally in tune. He comes off a bit more laddie and a bit more brutish, but he's not all that bad either. He's kind of a good dude. Like, he's not that bad. Yeah, he's not as good as AJ, but he's all right. And I found that interesting. The show subverts expectations at a few different points. And I think the characterization of Sweet Pea is just so well done. I love the scene where she sings Raw at the karaoke bar. It's just a good performance. Like, I can't really explain why I like it more than that, but it's very endearing. You've watched this girl murder a guy horrifically, might I add. And in a really interesting moment, you still are kind of rooting for her when she's singing Raw. You want her to get over her social anxiety. You don't want her to get caught. It's really quite well done. I also like the plot around the first man she kills. So the guy that accidentally urinates on her and then gets really aggressive with her, she stabs, and then you watch her stab him multiple times, and you can see her getting out her childhood trauma at him, right? He becomes a vessel for her anger and her bottled up rage. And what I found interesting is then she goes out of her way to kind of justify him being a shitty person because she can't live with the fact that she snapped and killed someone who seemingly didn't really deserve it. And in a convenient moment, it ends up being that he has been harassing people. He had a restraining order against him. He was a shitty guy. She then interviews his victim, and she sees it as, I've snuffed out a bully. You know, I've done something that I wish someone did for me. I've taken a bully out of this world. And it's interesting to note that pretty much all the bullies she kills are men. And the bully that is a woman, she can't kill. And I think this is important because I saw a really negative review of this show from someone who had read the book. And I just want to vent about this review for a second. So first off, from my impression, this season of television is actually set before the events of the book. And in the book, it is more a case of, instead of Sweet Pea being a bully, she's actually a murderer of men. She is taking out explicitly female rage against men, all right? It's kind of revenge of the woman, right? And this author seems really, really annoyed that instead of taking that direction, this prequel series took the direction of just being about bullying. Sometimes I think complaining that something isn't a one-to-one adaptation is kind of a frustrating way to engage things. Obviously, you can be disappointed, but writing off an entire series because it didn't do the thing in the book the way you liked it feels short-sighted. On top of that, this is a prequel series, but also, like, I loved the original Speak No Evil, and this new Speak No Evil is more American. It is less dark in its ending. The themes aren't as explicit. However, what you get instead is a fun American version of that core story, right? It feels like two different authors tackled the same story and both were really good results in a different direction. And that's what I think this Sweet Pea version is. And I think writing off the entire show because it wasn't the book but visualized is really disappointing. But also, and the reason I bring this up is I actually think it's important to note that this is rather feminist. Every single man she ends up killing is a man, and the narrative that the bullies worth dying are men because they are abusive, because they are antagonistic, is baked into the show.
How big is it?
Norman from work for failing to acknowledge my potential.
That is still a core part of the show. It is a reflection of misogyny.
People I'd love to kill. Man-spreaders.
Her workplace is full of men that call her Sweet Pea, right? Her workplace is full of men that often discount her ability and don't see her for who she truly is. And that's why she finds it easier to end up killing men rather than killing Julia. And on top of that, it ends up being that Julia is being abused by her husband. And that is kind of the turning point of the story. So I think it is actually there baked into the show, and it was probably just a different thing they wanted to do in the show for this prequel series to get us to the point of where the book started. So yeah, I found that review really disappointing, but also the feminist messaging is there. I think it's a bit short-sighted to say it's not. Next, I really love the cat and mouse game that started between Sweet Pea and Marina, the cop. Holy fuck. Holy shit, this is so good. So in a really great character moment of writing, right? When Sweet Pea is being investigated for one of the murders, right? She actually talks to this woman named Marina one-to-one and says like, oh, I feel like you're not seen by your workplace. I know how that feels. I feel like your boss doesn't see you. This is a moment where Sweet Pea sees Marina as sort of a similar person to her, right? She sees how she's treated in the workplace and relates to her. And this clearly means a lot to Marina. In a really interesting moment, right, Marina really resonates with this and is really struck by this and really touched by this. And what I find interesting is instead of being like, oh, I'm really rooting for Sweet Pea, she gets this interesting fascination and obsession with Sweet Pea, similar to this kind of symbiotic relationship that Sweet Pea has with Julia. And it starts innocent, right? Marina's just kind of interested in Sweet Pea and kind of wants to gain insight into who she is and why. And then through this, discovers that Sweet Pea is actually almost definitely the murderer. and she feels ripped off. It's really interesting. She feels betrayed by Sweet Pea. It reminds me of what Joker 2 was exploring, this idea of like false gods and like worshipping people who aren't really worthy of your worship. It seems like Marina is really kind of disappointed because she wanted to relate to Sweet Pea, right? She wanted to be friends with Sweet Pea, and now she needs to take her in for murder. And this dovetails really nicely into an incredible moment of writing, right? Where Marina then goes to her boss, similar to how Sweet Pea would go to her boss and be like, oh, I've got this story. I've got this journalism story that I really want you to run. Marina goes to her boss and says, we really need to investigate Sweet Pea. And the boss obviously doesn't take this on board. And the boss obviously doesn't take her seriously. And in this great moment, all right, Marina has this outburst where she goes, I know what Sweet Pea's like. I know that she feels ripped off by the world. I know that she's doing this. I know that she's doing that. And it's this incredible moment where it's like Marina knows the way Sweet Pea ticks because Sweet Pea knew how Marina ticks because they saw themselves. And it's this moment where Marina is simultaneously revealing stuff about herself and Sweet Pea. It's just really well written. It's really good stuff. I really, really like it, right? They're like two sides of the same coin. And what I really like is that Marina gets obsessed with Sweet Pea and cracking the case on her. And it seems like at a certain point, she's not really interested in the actual victims. She's not doing this for good reason. She's doing this because it's like, oh, I related to you in that moment and I feel like you fucked me over and I'm kind of obsessed with you now and I want to bring you to justice. And I know it's like at the end of the day, that is the same thing. Like she is doing the right thing overall. But to me, it feels like she has a personal vendetta against Sweet Pea. It feels personal. And I find that interesting. You know, her obsession, her willingness to break the law. The way this feels is that even if she wasn't a cop, she would still be trying to find this out. That is the vibe I got. I don't know if you guys picked up on that, but it felt like Marina's obsession with capturing Sweet Pea was purely because it was like, oh, I thought we were going to be friends and I'm really disappointed that you're kind of like deceiving me and like killing these people. I'm going to track you down because I want to understand because I also want to kill people. She confesses at a certain point that she has murderous fantasies. And it's almost this thing of like, I also want to murder people, but I didn't act on it. And I want to understand you because by understanding you and what you went through by killing people, I can understand myself and whether that's worth it for me. It's incredibly interesting. I'm very curious if in future seasons, Marina also starts murdering or helping Sweet Pea get away with it. On top of that, I just love the character arc. I love the story of Sweet Pea using these murders to then boost her career. So she'll like murder someone, right? And then go into work and be like, I reckon that another person was murdered. I reckon it was a stab wound. I reckon this. Like she has like leads, right? And she only has these leads because she knows she killed them, which is obviously not a good plan. Eventually cops are going to figure this out. But yeah, really good stuff. Now, I do need to vent slightly. There's one thing that did bug me in this show. Now, it's sort of fixed by the very end of it with the murder of AJ, which we will get to. We will get to because it's awesome. There's this thing of like every single person she murders is somewhat justified, right? And after a while, it feels like the show really starts to almost break logic. Like it feels like the universe is working in her favor to present her with situations where it's easy to murder. All these people are just shitty. And up until the end with the murder of AJ, which might be the point, right? This is the first one she's not going to be able to morally justify. It just feels a little convenient at times. Like for example, right? She goes to stab someone. And then this douchey coworker is riding on his bike and sees her. And Sweet Pea chases him down. And you're sitting there and you're like, oh my God, she's going to murder someone in broad daylight. She's going to get caught. But like, what else is she going to do, right? Because he'll go to the cops. And in a very boring moment, he just randomly gets hit by a bus. And I found this really disappointing for a few reasons. First off, I feel like a way more interesting way for that story to go is he actually doesn't tell anyone and starts blackmailing her for leads. Like he starts working with her and being like, well, if you're going to murder people, you're going to tell me everything so I can then get the jump on it. That could have been really interesting. Or if he was just a douche for an episode or two and started trying to blackmail her in general and then she killed him or something. But I just found it really kind of like convenient that in this moment where it could have been this great scene, he just gets hit by a bus. And in a show where she's already murdered people that seemingly like present themselves on a platter, you know, it was just a bit like... okay, on top of that, there's this section towards the end where you find out that Julia's partner is abusive. And I felt like the turn was just a bit too convenient and poorly written. It's not that I have an issue with the husband being an abusive piece of shit. I actually thought it made it a lot more interesting with the fact that Julia is also a victim now in Sweet Pea's eyes. But I just thought the portrayal of domestic abuse felt a bit quick, a bit rush. a bit cartoonish, and it was just kind of like very ham-fisted to be like, all right, we're going to elevate the situation very quickly, and then he's going to stand on a ledge so then Sweet Pea can push him off. It was just to be like, okay, like I would have enjoyed a more subtle, kind of slower build to his eventual murder. Even if it was Julia that snaps and kills him and Sweet Pea like helps her cover up something, but it just felt a little rushed and a little convenient for my liking. Again, it's not an issue with the fact that the husband was abusive. I don't mind that. I actually found it interesting. I just wish the way it was written, the way it was handled, the way it was revealed was a bit more tasteful and a bit more played into and explored. But I do really love, I absolutely love the murder of AJ. And this is why I might have to walk back some of the criticisms I just listed, because there is this sense in the show where it's like, the universe is almost just like presenting these situations where she can murder, and it just felt a little convenient and contrived. And on top of that, the fact that every single one was pretty much justified felt a little easy for my liking. But I think what the show is getting at with AJ and the murder of AJ is that eventually she's going to take a turn. She can't even justify this on her own moral compass. She stabs AJ because she has to. She stabs him purely because he knows who she is, and he's obviously going to do the right thing because he's a good guy. He figures out the knife thing, right? In a great scene, might I add. I absolutely love the way he pieces it together that she is the murderer. She lets it like a Freudian slip, right? And he goes, wait, hang on, I said that about, that's the knife, that's your knife. So well done. I love the scene too. There's no dialogue. You know, she doesn't say anything. He can tell she knows, she can tell he knows. Like, they both know what they're thinking. Incredible scene. So well done. And she murders him. She murders a guy that was really sweet, really looked out for her, apologized when he didn't need to. You know, they just had really nice sex the night before. Like, it was rough. All right. And she stabs him. And it's the most gruesome murder of the scene. You feel every single stab. It's savage and brutal and ruthless, and he's gone. He's snuffed out, and the season ends with her sister opening the door. We don't know how that's going to go, but yeah, incredible ending. And I think hopefully in future seasons, it does look like this is leading into more seasons. I hope in future seasons, she's going to try and justify the murder of AJ. She's going to do her darndest to dig into his past and find out, you know, oh, actually he was really bad, so I don't need to be angry at myself for murdering him. And I'm really hoping that the point of the murder of AJ is that some murders you can't justify, even on your own twisted moral compass. Like, he was a good guy and you murdered him, and now you need to reckon with that. And the reason I say that is not because I have an issue with a show where a woman murders a bunch of men. I mean, go off, Queen. I'm sure you're frustrated. But my issue is it just felt very convenient that every single one felt justified, and the ones that were maybe questionable, the universe kind of just sorted out for her. So I really find it interesting that I think the direction this show is going in is this one isn't particularly easy to justify. I find that really interesting, really fascinating, and just, again, an incredible performance from Ella Purnell. I absolutely love it. I absolutely love it. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe. Please let me know what you would like me to talk about next, and have a lovely day.